Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're going to unravel a mystery that, believe it or not, connects a 14th century bestseller to a wild 21st century internet conspiracy. We're talking about a lost empire, incredible journeys, and, those blank spaces on the map of history. Okay, just look at this. I mean, wow. To most of us, this is just a beautiful, kind of temporary building from a World's Fair, right? But for a growing community online, this is something else entirely. They believe that grand architecture like this isn't what it seems at all. They say it's actually evidence of a huge, forgotten civilization. But then you've got the critics, who call it something else entirely, the QAnon of architecture. So, what's the real story behind the legend of the Tartarian Empire? Is it a hidden history, or just a modern myth? All right, let's really get into it. First up, let's tackle what this theory that's got the internet buzzing is all about. This is the story of the internet's lost empire. Okay, so the theory basically goes like this. Once upon a time, there was this global superpower, right? The Tartarian Empire. And they were super technologically advanced. We're talking responsible for pretty much all the incredible architecture you can think of, from the US Capitol all the way to the Taj Mahal. But then, poof, it was wiped out by a mysterious mud flood. And not just that, it was deliberately scrubbed from history by some powerful, shadowy group. And what's really interesting is this whole idea started out in Russian nationalist circles, but now it's gone totally global, tapping into that feeling a lot of people have that, maybe the official history we're told isn't the whole story. All right, so to figure this out, we've got to go back in time and look at some old maps. And this is where we find our very first clue. Because, get this, a place called Tartary did actually exist. Well, at least the name did. See, for centuries, the name Tartary was basically a giant placeholder. It's what Western mapmakers called this huge, poorly understood chunk of Asia. It all starts back in the 13th century with the Mongols. By the 1500s, it's this massive, single territory on the maps. Then, as people actually learned more, it starts to splinter into different Tartaries. And by the end of the 19th century, it just disappears from maps completely. Okay, check out this map from 1570. Tartaria covers almost all of North and Central Asia. It's even labeled as the Kingdom of the Great Khan. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Early mapmakers had this huge blank spot, and what did they do? They just filled it in with this legendary power, kind of mixing up a vague area with the memory of the Mongol Empire, which was long gone by then. But now, fast forward to 1796, and the whole picture has changed. I mean, look at this. That one giant empire, it's gone. Instead, you see Western Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Siberia. And here's the really crucial point. The name wasn't erased in some grand conspiracy. It was just replaced. As explorers actually went there and filled in the blanks, that single mysterious land got broken down into more accurate, real regions. Okay, so if the real Tartary on the maps was just a placeholder, then where did this whole fantasy of a super powerful, amazing Eastern Empire even come from? Well, for that, we have to jump in our time machine and go way back to the 14th century, and to a book that pretty much defined how all of Europe saw the East. This book was called The Book of Marvels and Travels, and it was supposedly written by an English knight, a Sir John Mandeville. And I'm not kidding, this thing was a medieval bestseller. It was a total phenomenon, copied by hand into hundreds of manuscripts all over Europe. It was this epic story of a journey to the Holy Land and then way, way beyond, deep into the so-called wonders of Asia. And this was basically the author's sales pitch. He was saying, hey, I'm Sir John Mandeville. I've been there, I've seen it all, and I came back to tell you about it. You can believe me. He came across as this totally worldly, credible eyewitness. But here's the twist. That whole persona, it was a very clever fiction. The consensus now is that there was no real globe-trotting Sir John. In fact, he probably never traveled much at all. Honestly, you can think of him as the medieval version of a viral influencer. His book completely defined Asia for generations of Europeans. All his stories about the Great Khan, about Tartary, about all these mythical beasts and strange peoples, that became the image of the East for pretty much everyone. So what was actually in this book that made it so massive? And more importantly, how can we be so sure it's not a true story? So here's the thing you have to understand. The author was way more of an armchair traveler than a real explorer. The book is actually just a brilliant mashup. He skillfully blended real travel stories from his library, from guys like Odoric of Pordenone, with stuff from encyclopedias, old romance stories, and, well, a whole lot of pure fantasy. And man, what a world he cooked up. The book was this amazing cocktail of the plausible, the exotic, and the just completely bonkers. You'd get a description of the Sultan's court right next to stories about, monstrous races with dog heads, the mythical Christian kingdom of Priester John, and even trees that grew actual bread. No, really. But, okay, if you need a real smoking gun, like absolute proof that the author was just making things up from his library instead of reporting from his travels, the most telling clue is when he tries to write out foreign languages. This right here just blows the whole thing wide open. On the left, that's the Hebrew alphabet, according to Mandeville's book. And as you can see, it's completely made up. It looks nothing like real Hebrew, but look at the right. This is from a really early French copy, where some scribe actually felt the need to add a correction note. They literally wrote, "Here are the letters of the Hebrews, and they are truer than the ones written before." It's a medieval fact check right there on the page. But amidst all this wild fantasy, there is a darker side. For its time, the book is often seen as surprisingly open-minded, even admiring other faiths like Islam. And yet, it has this uniquely hostile tone towards Jewish people, repeating some really old, ugly stereotypes and linking them to the apocalyptic armies of Gog and Magog, who he claims are trapped in the mountains of Asia somewhere. So, okay, we've got this medieval fantasy on one hand and a modern internet myth on the other. So how do we connect them? What's the thread that ties Sir John Mandeville's wild stories to the whole Tartarian Empire conspiracy? I mean, the parallels are pretty striking when you look at them side by side. Mandeville's book filled the blank spots on the medieval map with monsters and magic. Today's conspiracy fills the gaps in our history books with a hidden empire and lost technology. The armchair explorer with his library has basically just become the internet researcher with 100 browser tabs open. It all points to this really deep, timeless human desire for wonder, and that little suspicion that maybe, just maybe, the world is way more magical or sinister than we're being told. So when you boil it all down, the name Tartary was just a void on the map for hundreds of years, a place of total mystery and legend. And that made it the perfect canvas for a 14th century writer to paint his fantasies. And it also made it the perfect empty foundation for 21st century theorists to build their lost empire on top of. They say nature abhors a vacuum, and it's pretty clear the human imagination does too. We're storytellers, and when we see a gap in the narrative, we just can't help but try and fill it. So this whole strange tale of Tartary, from medieval maps all the way to modern memes, really shows us one thing. Our fascination with lost worlds and hidden histories is just as powerful today as it was 700 years ago. And it leaves you with a pretty interesting question, doesn't it? As we keep digging into our past, new gaps, new voids are always going to appear. So what stories will we use to fill them next?